Hello, everyone. I'm just waiting for our panelists. Here they are. Awesome. Okay, so welcome everybody to our very first webinar. As this is our first one ever, please bear with us in case of any technical issues or in case any pets come in out of nowhere. We've tried our best to minimize them, but if there is, please forgive us. Today, we're going to be going over how to stand out as an applicant. So our panelists today, all three of us work at a company named Jonar. It's a software company in Montreal, Canada. My name is Celine. I am the HR manager, and I've been here for 2.5 years. We also have Tamron.
Hi guys, my name is Tamron. I am the chief of staff.
I can't hear you, Tamron.
Oh, I can hear her.
Oh, I can hear you now because I have my headphones in.
Sorry about that, guys. Obviously, this is our first time. So I'm Tamron. I'm the chief of staff at Jonar. I've been at Jonar for just over 6 years. I started my career at Jonar in marketing before moving into the HR team. And we also have Eileen here.
Hi, I'm Eileen. I've been working at Jonar for a little over 6 months, and I'm the one that focuses on recruitment. So I'm kind of the gatekeeper before you get to meet Celine and Tam.
So we wanted to just give you a little bit of background first about why we wanted to do this webinar and what inspired us to do this webinar in the first place. So the first reason is obviously there's a global pandemic right now, and it has taken its toll on a lot of people. The unemployment rates are rising, and I believe in Canada the unemployment rates are at about 13% right now, and that's pretty high. And the effect that it's having is that there are fewer jobs available, and when you're applying for a job, it means that there's a lot more candidates that are applying to those same positions, and you're going to have to work harder to stand out from the crowd because there's just more people who are competing with you for the same position. That's the first reason.
And why do you have us as hosts? Well, collectively, we've all been through literally thousands of applications. So we've gotten pretty good at knowing what makes a good application versus a bad one. So we're going to share with you some tips that we wish every applicant knew, but that from our data, about 90% of people don't seem to know. So we'll share that with you as well.
Yeah, and finally, we've decided to do it at this time because it's graduation season. Being a recent graduate myself, I know it can be really scary to go into that next step in your journey. So we'll be giving you some tips and tricks to get your big boy, big girl career going.
So before we dive in, we just wanted to caveat two things, put two disclaimers out. One of them, the first one, is that we're a small company and the tips and tricks that we're going to be sharing are not necessarily going to be as relevant or applicable for larger companies. Larger companies often have more budget to have software systems that screen resumes and applications for keywords and key phrases. Smaller companies like ours don't have that software system and don't have budget for that software system, and often prefer to take a more human approach to their recruitment. And that's what we do. That's what lots of small companies do. So we have a human being behind every single application, and the way that you get their attention will obviously be a little bit different from the way that you would be trying to get the attention of bigger companies. So just bear that in mind as we go through our points. This is a little bit more geared towards smaller companies and not as much towards bigger companies.
And our second caveat is that we'll be only covering the first step of the recruitment process, so the application itself. And that's not to say that all the other steps aren't as important, but to get your foot in the door, you have to start with the application. So that's what we'll be focusing on.
Yeah. There are other important topics too that we'd love to discuss with you. So we'll have a quick poll before we go into our Q&A, where you can tell us and vote on what you'd like to see next. So let me go over the agenda really quickly. So we're going to start with the basics of what you should know. Then we're going to go into standing out, and then lastly into the big F, which is fit, and why it's so important and how you can demonstrate that you are a good fit. And then we'll be going into our Q&A. So the basics. The basics is things that you should already know, and hopefully you're going to be like, duh, of course I know this. I do this all the time. That's amazing. But I think we can all say, it's safe to say that about 90% of people don't follow these basic rules. So we're going to cover them really quickly, and then we're going to go into our next point, which is standing, how you can stand out. So your application is your foot in the door. This is most likely our first impression of you, and it's the one that's going to stick. So really, we try to encourage people to put as much effort here as possible. We know effort means taking time, and maybe you don't have the most of your time, but your goal is to convince the recruiter to want to get to know you more, to maybe spend time bringing you in for an interview or having a phone call with you. So really put in as much effort as possible. And that leads us into our second point,
which is that it's really, really better to invest in quality applications than investing in the quantity of applications you're submitting. Something we highly recommend is that you do your research, you find a handful of companies or positions that you're really, really passionate about, you're really interested in it, and you're really excited about the opportunity of working in that role or working in that position, and really customizing your application to the handful of companies instead of going out and sending hundreds of applications. We can tell if you've mass applied versus when you've really put the effort in. So you really do want to take the effort to customize your application for the job that you're applying for the company that you're applying for. And I know it's hard to, it takes time, it takes effort, and it's hard to see how this really works, because if you cast a wider net, well, then obviously it's more likely for you to get a call back. But I promise you, if you spend more time investigating the companies and the positions that you really want and really focusing on a good application for the handful of companies, it will serve you much better, and you're way more likely to get a call back than if you mass apply and submit a mediocre application to a lot of different companies. Which leads to a third point. I think we're at our third point now, which is that when you're applying to a small company like ours, where there's a human being behind the application, if there's one thing that I learned from my experience in marketing, is that it's really important to consider your audience. Know who it is that you're talking to. So Eileen's a recruiter. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight into what it's like to be you and what it's like to be a recruiter in the first place.
Yeah, like every other recruiter, we go through hundreds of applications, even in one day, and we're really, really busy. As I said, I focus on recruitment, but that's not the only thing I do. I also do other HR things. So keep that in mind when you're applying. And don't forget that I'm human. I'm flesh and blood, as you can see. So try to appeal to that side. It's something that you're not able to do when you're applying to bigger companies. So keep that in mind. Try to appeal to my human side, my emotions. And another painful truth that I'd like to share with you guys, and I'm hoping that it won't burst your bubbles. A lot of candidates that apply at Jonar and at other companies are recent graduates. So they don't have a lot of work experience, so they tend to look very similar. Their resumes are similar education, similar schools that they went to, and side projects. So the resume won't necessarily be the way that you stand out, but will cover other ways that you can stand out in your application.
So now you know who your user is. Your goal is to give that user the best experience ever. A positive user experience with an informative application or an aesthetically pleasing application will give you higher chances of getting a callback. So we're going to go into what makes a good and a bad user experience.
Yeah, so specifically for resumes, we've put two examples here for you. The left one is something that we don't encourage you to do, and the right one is something that we really, really hope that you'll do after this webinar. The first one is usually a resume that you export from places like Indeed. So it's information that you've already put in, but once you export it, a lot of you don't look over it to make sure that it makes sense. So as you can see, it's pretty boring, very linear, and very wordy. Compared to the one on the right where it's colorful, there's a different layout. So if I want to go into work experience or skills, I know where to go. And the colors really, it's aesthetically pleasing. So I would rather read the right one than the left one. So keep that in mind when you're doing your resume.
Sorry.
So Canva is a platform that you can use to do your resume. It offers a bunch of different templates that you can play with. You can play with the colors, the layout, as I said previously. Google Docs also offers different templates that you can play with. This is something that you'll only have to do once, and it'll make a big difference for the recruiter.
Another point that we want to talk about, and Eileen's already kind of mentioned it, is that she's really, really busy reading through tons and tons of applications. So what you want to do is not leave the recruiter guessing. Be as informative as possible in your resume, and try to answer all the questions that they're going to be asking while they're reading through your resume. So what are some of the things that we often see, that we often have questions about? Well, one of the really, really simple ones is the dates of your graduation. It's really good to put the year that you're graduating, but it's even more useful if you go so far as to tell us which semester you are expecting to graduate in. If you don't know exactly, just put an expected date and tell us that it's an expected date. That helps us kind of plan around the timing for our recruitment. Something else that we often ask questions about are job gaps. Now, I'm not trying to say that job gaps are a bad thing. The COVID situation obviously has had an impact on people, and there are going to be gaps in your resume, but it's useful to explain them, to just put a note about, you know, what happened during that time. And then the final thing that we often have questions about are career changes. Again, not a bad thing. If you're a software developer and you're really interested in marketing and you want to apply for a marketing job, that's great. And in fact, for small companies like that, like us, who are looking for people with different experiences and different backgrounds to add to our team, we might actually be quite interested in somebody who comes from a non-traditional background for a marketing position. But what's really important is that you explain that that's what you're trying to do and why you're trying to do that. Because the last thing you want is for us to think it was a mistake and that you accidentally applied to the wrong job, which, let me tell you, that happens quite often, and we just disqualify those applications because we don't understand why they're trying to make that career change. So don't do that. Make sure that you answer some of these questions. At the end of the day, you're trying to reduce the amount of work that we have, and you're trying to give us the best experience possible. Now, we want to get to know people as human beings too. We'll go into that in a little bit. And you want to make us a little bit curious about who you are as a human being. You want to kind of pique our curiosity, but you don't want to do this with the facts that you're listing on your resume. You can list all of those things, tell us the story, and don't leave us guessing about the information that we're looking for.
All right, this is going to be our last basic point, but it's personally my biggest pet peeve. The resume is not the same as the cover letter. They serve two completely different purposes. So what is your resume? It's a list of facts about you, maybe your past, your experiences, some skills, some backgrounds. That's great, but it only serves as a basis for us. It doesn't paint the whole picture of who you are, because you as an individual, you're more than just a resume. You are a human who has feelings, hopes and dreams for the future, trajectory that you want to go on, and adventures you want to go on. And that's kind of what is going to be interesting for us, to get a little bit more, to know more about you. Your resume is definitely not your cover letter is not your resume in long form. This happens way too often, where it's just a repeat of what we read in the resume, just longer. That is not a good thing that you can do for a user experience. And the last one is, when people, they do this a lot, is you are offered the opportunity to put a cover letter and you don't have time. This kind of shows that you don't really care. So instead you just put in your resume twice. This is an automatic disqualification for us, because either you're not attentive to detail, you made a mistake and you didn't put the right cover letter where it was supposed to go, or either you just are not interested, so you just put your resume twice, and that's really frustrating. Not using a cover letter, we'll talk about it later, there's other things you can do instead of a cover letter, but not using this opportunity to tell your story is a missed opportunity for you to market yourself and for us to get more insight on you as an individual. Let's go into our next slide.
Yeah, and so as much as we encourage you to do a cover letter and a customized letter for the companies that you're really interested in, a lot of you are going to choose not to write one. So we offer the opportunity to stand out in a different way by asking you what's one really intriguing thing about yourself in our application process. So a lot of companies won't offer you this opportunity, but it's something that you should definitely add into your cover letter for other companies, because that's a very definite way to stand out. So that's one of my favorite parts of the application process, is that question. If it's answered really well, it's something that can stick with us for a very long time. So that intriguing fact, if it's done well again, is something that we'll remember in 5 years, or if it's not done well or not answered at all, we'll forget you once we get to the next application. So just to give you a few examples, things to do, some that are silly and less serious are once we had a candidate that talked about his eyelashes, and he said that his eyelashes grew very long, so he had to trim them because he wore glasses. So that's a really silly one that sticks with you. Another one for the next step is showing your skills and your passion through this question or through answering it in the cover letter. So if you talk about how passionate you are about organizing D&D games, that shows that you're a leader and that you're organized and that you're willing to rally the troops to start playing the game. Another thing that you can talk about is sports. If you're really into football and you've played football all your life, you have your favorite team, you've seen their matches for the past 5 years, that shows that you're a really good team player. So things that you shouldn't be doing is things that we see that you didn't put the effort in, you didn't do some soul searching. If you talk about how much of a hard worker you are or how determined you are, these are things that are really simple and we can tell that you didn't put the time in. So try not to do that. Take the time, take a step back, do some introspection to see who you truly are. And things that you might think that are intriguing, but that we've realized with time aren't as intriguing and as unique are things like traveling. It seems like a lot of you travel. So if you're going to talk about how many countries you've been to and things like that, it's not going to make you stand out from the crowd. Go into more detail. So if you've traveled to a bunch of different countries, talk about one country that really stood out to you or that surprised you, and tell us why it surprised you. So take this time, do some introspection, soul searching, and find a way to make us remember you.
Yeah. One random one that I just had to share is someone had once mentioned in their intriguing thing that they shared the same birthday as everyone else in their family, their mom, their sisters and brothers and all that. And it was on June 5th. And that date has stuck to me. And forever on June 5th, I will think about this candidate's family birthday experience.
At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to score that first date. The recruitment process is a little bit like dating. You want the recruiter to invite you out on the first date and maybe a second one and maybe a third one, and maybe you guys will end up in a relationship at the end of the day. And so what are some things that you can do to score that first date? Well, some of these are, pretty straightforward. The first one is get the name right. If somebody on a dating app, if your name's Kim or my name's Tamron, if somebody was like, oh, hey, Jessica, that's kind of awkward. And you won't imagine how many times people name the wrong person or the wrong company in their cover letter. We've been called Jonas before. Our company name is Jonar. We've been called Coca-Cola. We're not Coca-Cola. Just make sure that you pay attention to some of the smaller details and make sure that you have somebody go through your application, maybe a friend, maybe a coworker, maybe a parent or a sibling, somebody who can take a second set of eyes to your application to make sure that all of those details have been covered. And then the final thing is to avoid showing us that you've mass applied. The worst thing is when you're in a dating application and somebody sent you a message and you can tell that that went out to 20 other people. That's really, really awkward. And we want to feel special at the end of the day. We want to be wooed a little bit. So try to avoid the mass application. Try to make us feel special and make sure that you've covered all of the little details that might show that you have mass applied. So how can you do that?
Yeah, so ways to make us feel special, or any company that you're applying to feel special, is referencing things that you've noticed in a job description, or if you went to the website and you read through the blog articles and one of them really stood out to you, talk about it in your cover letter. Why did it stand out to you? Why did it resonate so much with you? Another way is to talk about the products. Companies work really hard to develop their products, so if you talk about them and you did your research, you show that you're fascinated fascinated by them or interested even. It shows a lot about the applicant. And finally, sharing the values or sharing similar values with the company. A lot of companies put their values on their website. It's not for nothing. So if you go through those values and you see that you resonate a lot with them, talk about that. So not just, I'm really passionate. Why are you passionate? Give us some examples. So things like that. And I also wanted to share one little tip for the cover letter. As a small company, sometimes it's pretty easy to find the recruiters' names on LinkedIn. A quick 2-minute research could show you that I'm the recruiter for Jonar, and it'll also show you Celine and Tam. It's okay if you address all of us or just one of us. It at least shows us the intention behind it, and it shows that you went that extra step to do that research. Try to avoid things, more stiffer ways to talk to us. So if you say, "Dear Sir, Madam," that way we can tell that you didn't really do the research. Or if you say, "To whom it may concern," for us particularly, and for smaller companies, if you do something warmer like "Howdy, folks at Jonar," or things like that, it shows a sense of humor. So that's a good thing.
Those are the basic points. Hopefully up until now, you're like, okay, I do all of those things. So that's awesome. So let's move on to how you can stand out. So at the end of the day, it's all about being the pink sheep. Your goal is really not to blend in. I think of the thousands of applications I've been through, I can only remember 20 to 25 that really stick out in my mind and that I'll never forget. And that's what you should try to achieve and aspire to do for every single application that you do. And your cover letter is not your only option to show your personality. If you should use your skills to your advantage. If you're a writer, you should write. If you are a film editor, maker, you should make a film. And if you're an artist, it's okay to draw too. I'm going to share with you a little bit later some of my favorite examples, and I'll show you the visuals so you can see it too. But Eileen and Taryn, why don't you go through some of your favorite ones?
Yeah, so one of my favorites is the visual ones, because I do tend to read a lot of resumes and a lot of cover letters, so that gives me a little break from it. Particularly slideshows and PowerPoints are my favorite. If they're really done correctly, it can really be an immersive experience. So if you talk about what type of person you are, the interests that you have. We had one candidate talk about how passionate he was about concerts, and he used to go to different concerts and meet the artists. So that's something that really stands out to us. And also talking about why you're a good fit in those slideshows. And it just covers all the questions that a recruiter has, and it's a good way to stand out.
My personal favorite actually comes from one of our panelists here, Celine. When back in the day, some of the applications that we were getting were pretty dull, and we weren't getting all that many creative applications in the first place. And Celine was one of the first few that really, really stood out and really took a creative approach in their application. So what is it that Celine did? Well, she followed a lot of the principles that we've already talked about and will continue to talk about. She built us a website. Now, I know a lot of people build websites, and that's actually a really good and creative way to tell us a little bit about yourself. A lot of people build portfolios on their websites. A lot of people showcase their skills through building a website, and that's really good. But what Celine did is she went one step further. She made us feel really, really, really special. And how did she make us do that? Well, she went onto our website and she found what our branding colors were, and she incorporated that all over her website. She basically mimicked and imitated what we were. And she went even further, which is that she used a URL that was something to the effect of Celine wants to work at Jonar, or Celine is the best person for Jonar, something like that. The URL was short and snappy, but it really showed that it was an application for us, and it wasn't an application that she was, or a website that she was going to send out to many other companies. It was specifically designed for us. And she did all the other things that we talked about, which is she showed what she was passionate about. She shared her interests. She told us why this job was the one that she wanted. And she showed us how she could be a really great person for the job. So that's the one that really stood out to me, because it really showcases all of the examples that we've talked about, and really made us feel special. And in fact, it might have been the only job that she applied for.
Fun fact, yes. It definitely was the only job that I applied to. I had read the job description that Tamron had written, and I really resonated with the personality that the company was. It really matched my own personality. And so I did a bit of digging and I read all the articles on their website. And then I was like, okay, I know how to make a website. I have a marketing degree. Let me try and do something a little bit different. Let me try to market myself. And so I made this really goofy website with like, Celine wants to work at jonar.com. And I try to use my skills and showcase why I wanted the position, why I thought I was going to be good at it. And I think I may be wrong, but I think I'm a little bit of a funny person. Like I have some humor skills, so I tried to include some humor in there too. So it would be a really fun experience for the person who was going to read it. And actually, it's not the most unique thing. Now we get a lot of very good applications and people have one-upped me many times. And I think I can go into some of those now. So this one has stuck to me because it was the first drawing that we had ever received. So it was like a break of me reading through lots and lots of resumes, through lots of cover letters, and it was drawings. And this person was a talented artist, and he was like, I'm not just going to write a cover letter. I'm not very talented at the writing part, so I'm going to convey who I am through some drawings. These are only a few snippets. There were many more, but it showed who he was. And as humans, we're multidimensional. We're not just Greg, the software developer, or Greg, the computer science major. We have multiple facets of who we are as individuals. And I think that's really great that he showcased that here. And this is one of the things that really interests me, maybe not everyone, but for me, I really love to know what makes people, what are people passionate about? What is it that gets them out of bed in the morning? And so whenever it tells me something that gets them really excited, I automatically get really excited too, because I think something that's great about our company specifically is we hire those people who are passionate. So when you go into the office, even if it hasn't got anything to do with the work, maybe they're just really passionate about like science. We had someone who was so excited about NASA, and he would come in every day and talk about the latest rocket ship that was released into space. And while I never want to be in a rocket space ship myself, it was nice and to be around those people who get excited. So I think it would be great if you also add that. A second one that was great was this game. And it was different because it really included myself and Eileen. It was a break from just reading, and we had to think because this person had made a journey for us to complete. And based on the answers we gave in this story, it would take us down a different adventure. And so I think it featured, we had to save Beyonce from Liam Neeson. I can't remember exactly what happened, but there was a different scenario based on our answers. And I think you can see she had made this with a website called ChoiceScript. So that could be something interesting that can inspire you. And this is our latest one that I really enjoyed. So this person is obviously very comfortable in front of the camera. So he made a YouTube video just for us. And it featured his cat as the main prop. And he took us around his apartment and he showed us the things that he really enjoyed to do with his cat in every single picture. And that was great. Like, he likes to paint, he likes to ride his bike, but he also told us why he would be great for the position. So I thought that was really interesting. There are other examples. We had someone who shared with us a secret family recipe. So apart from that person's family, we are the only ones in the world who know this Alfredo sauce recipe, which is very interesting. So that person obviously got a call back. Someone was a piano teacher and wrote piano songs, and they wrote a song about our product, which is an ERP software, which was very entertaining and enjoyable. And there are people who are really good at making speeches, so they wrote a speech for us. Others who are great writers, someone wrote a poem about us, which was really fun. And I think one which was a standard application, it was pretty interesting, but the thing that got me was at the end, it was a simple thing where they finished their cover letter with, if you had to choose one to eat for the rest of your life, would you rather eat a burrito or a taco? And it was such a strange question to ask, but it showed that that person cared about who I was as an individual, what were some things that I liked, and it was engaging, and it was what made me want to write back to them and create a conversation. But there are other things. You can make websites, games, like there's many options for you out there. So now that you've got the recruiter's attention, what do you need to know? So we're gonna go into fit. So why is this so important? At Jonar, we talk about the workplace as an ecosystem, and the recruiter's job is to add people who are going to bring value and not someone who's going to upset the ecosystem. So if you're a nature documentary fan like myself, you'll know that everyone that comes into, that we have on our planet, and every species kind of brings some kind of value. Like a fox and a bee, for example, serve different purposes. Like the fox is going to be the one that eats the prey so that we can like regulate the population of certain species, and the bee is going to pollinate flowers and produce food. So that's amazing. But there are also species that don't bring value, and that when you're introducing a foreign species, it kind of destroys it. So our job with the understanding fit is to make sure you're going to be one of those people who are going to add value and not destroy the culture that we've been building. And that's through cultural fit and job fit.
Yeah, so for the cultural fit, as we've said previously, we always recruit with our values in mind. Some of our values are passion, honesty, being inspired, and learning. So showcasing that you do have those values in the application is a good thing for the recruiter. And also, as I said previously, we don't expect you to be perfect. So if honesty is not something that you have naturally, but that you're working on, you can talk to us more about it in your cover letter.
On the job fit side, the cultural fit is important, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really mean much if you haven't convinced us that you're the right person for the job itself. You might be the best person in the world, you might be the most interesting person in the world, but if you're not the right fit for the position, then it's not going to work out at the end of the day. So what can you do to demonstrate your job fit? Well, obviously, this comes in your experience, and we often start one of our software developer positions with this line in our cover letter, which is that the software development degree doesn't actually make you a software developer. You need the experience to really show us that that's what you can do. But there's a bit of a catch-22 in the world. A lot of companies require you to have experience for an entry-level position, but how are you supposed to get the experience if all the entry-level experiences require you to have experience in the first place? So if you're stuck in this catch-22 and this is the situation you find yourself in, the best thing that you can do is show your desire and your passion for learning. You might not have all of the experience that they need, but if you can show them that you're interested in learning and they're willing to teach you, then they're going to do that. The worst thing that you can do is to not show them that you're interested in learning, because they're not going to want to teach people who aren't interested in learning. So show your passion for learning, show them that you are willing to go the extra mile to pick up skills, to improve your skills, to improve yourself. And using this time, like the COVID situation where, you know, maybe finding a job is a little bit difficult and you're not being all that successful, use this time to also enhance your skills, to learn something new. If you're a developer, you can learn a new skill. If you can build an application, you can learn a new language. If you're in marketing, this is your opportunity to learn how to build a website. There are a lot of online resources and tools that you can use to continue to learn and to continue to enhance your skills. And then the other thing is, don't forget about some of the other experience that you have that isn't necessarily directly relevant to the job itself. If you have retail experience, there are lessons that you've learned there that are transferable to this experience or could be transferable to this experience. So try and highlight those when you're building your application. And again, you can do a little bit of soul searching and even try to find some experience that might not be as typical and highlight what you've learned from that experience. One of the ones that I really like is when people really highlight their experience as a middle child. When you think about it, a middle child is often the mediator between different relationships. They often have to deal with different personalities and kind of manage the relationship between that. And that's a skill that you can highlight on your application and showcase. So think about it a little bit and really try to use some of the projects that you are working on or some of the other experiences that you have to show your job fit and how you could be a good person for that role. And at the very, very end of the day, just show your passion and willingness to learn, because if you don't want to learn, nobody's going to want to teach you. But if you're willing to learn, there are tons and tons of people who will teach you the skills that you need.
Awesome. All right, now we're going to be going into our Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can send you a poll to complete, just so that we can know what next you would like to see. And then also you can write in your questions and upload the ones that you want us to answer. So let's send our first poll. Here we go. You'll have 35 seconds to answer it, apparently. So go ahead. And then we move on. Yep. Also, if you have any ideas on how people can develop skills, in the meantime, you can also add that and share it on the chat. If you are a developer, maybe you can start an app, or there are many things out there that you can learn. I think marketing people who want to develop some skills, I think trying to learn how to use SEO and maybe get people to come see your blog that you've made or your Instagram is interesting too. We have 20 seconds left just to answer the poll. I'm gonna end it. Awesome. All right, and 5. Okay, thanks. All right, good for us to know. So the main one is, with 65%, is people want to know how to succeed at the interview process. And the following one is networking virtually all you need to know. So I'm just going to start. That's a question that we got a lot. A lot of people submitted this question. Obviously, you're not going to be able to network as much now, as there's not many opportunities to go to job fairs and go to networking events. So how do you network with people online? LinkedIn is a great way to connect with people. However, I would try to advise you on certain things. As we've said before, recruiters tend to be very busy, and we get messages on LinkedIn every day, a flood of messages that come in. And if you ask specific questions, I'm going to be more I can't think of the word, more engaged to answer, because I have time. It's a quick question that I can answer. If you're asking, oh, I couldn't find the information on your website or in the job description, but can you tell me what are the tools that you use for a backend developer? That I can quickly answer you, and it starts the conversation. And then maybe you can reply to that. That's awesome. I'm going to learn that language now. Or maybe I'm going, oh, I already know this. I did a project in it, and that starts the conversation. But way too often I get messages from people who are like, can you tell me more about the position, or tell me more about your company? Well, I don't know what you already know. So I could write tons and tons of things in my whole day writing messages about our company or the positions, but I don't know if it really answers the question. So try to be specific if you're going to be the one who's going to contact and connect with people via LinkedIn. Do you two have anything to add to that part, or do you want to go into answering another question?
No, I think that was a very comprehensive answer.
Okay. What are some other questions you guys want to answer? What is the most upvoted? Because they don't have any job postings. Eileen, there was a question as well about like resumes. It's better to have a concise or a detailed resume. Do you want to go into that quickly?
Yeah, so at Jonah, and probably at smaller companies too, we like concise resumes more than detailed resumes. Try to keep it between 1 or 2 pages, even more so if you're a recent graduate. If you want to share some projects, share the ones that you really enjoy doing, not every single project that you've done in your at school and side projects. So try to keep it as simple and easy to read for the recruiter, and that way the experience will be better for them.
Tamron, do you want to? No, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. There's a question here that was asked by Akshat, which is the intriguing question and cover letter an either-or situation? I mean, do we have to submit both? So this is an interesting question. You don't have to, obviously, answer both of them, but what we recommend is any opportunity that you have to give a little bit more information about who you are is an opportunity that you should seize. If you decide not to answer, if you decide to submit a cover letter and not answer the question, you can do that, but it is a missed opportunity to give us a little bit of more insight into who you might be, what you might be interested in. Same goes the other way around. You can answer the question but not submit a cover letter. But again, it's a missed opportunity. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get the attention of the recruiter and give them a little bit of insight into who you are beyond just the skills and the facts that are listed on your resume. So what we recommend is that you really seize every single opportunity to do this. Because otherwise it's just a wasted opportunity. It's a missed opportunity at the end of the day.
Yeah. There's also a question here that I just want to answer quickly. Just a question, how often do small, medium companies use ATS services? So, I mean, it depends on the company. If it's a startup with 4 people, but they've just got $10 million in their funding from investors, and maybe they're getting hundreds of thousands of applications, then pretty sure they're going to be using an ATS system. But most small and medium companies don't. Like, I studied HR at school, and my friends who are now in HR, many of them work for small and medium-sized companies who they don't have an ATS, and they have humans. They have a HR team that are the ones who act as hiring managers and go through each application.
There is a distinction between an ATS, which is an application tracking system, and some of the software systems that they use to screen resumes and look for keywords. These are often systems that are added onto an application tracking system at large companies. So we mentioned this earlier as we got started. Maybe some of you guys missed it, but we're really talking about tips and tricks to appeal to recruitment processes that are based on human being reading your application. Some of the larger companies like Bombardier, like other companies, will use software systems that screen your application, and being creative like this may or may not be beneficial. So just bear that in mind when you are submitting an application. These are tips and tricks for a small company and not necessarily for how to get past the software systems that are reading your applications.
Go ahead, Eileen. It's your turn.
Yeah. So Grace asked a really good question, which is that if I'm very interested in a certain company, but they don't have any job postings up, is it worth sending an email to the recruiter? So particularly for us, you'll get lost in the crowd if you send us an email. I would recommend reaching out to us on LinkedIn and showing that you're interested in a certain position, and that way we can give you more information on when we're going to be recruiting for that position, so you can keep an eye on the careers page and apply when it's time to apply.
There's another question, which is, I usually put a date and address on my customized cover letter. Is this a good approach? The date, sure. The address is something that can be helpful, but it can also be deterring. If you, for example, say that you live very far away, but you're applying to a job in Montreal, Canada, you need to explain, like, you need to make sure that if your address is far away, you need to explain why that you intend to come to the location where the company is. Otherwise, we assume maybe you want to do remote work. We don't know if you have the specific visas. Also, if you live very far away, 2 hours away, that is also like, oh, we start to wonder, oh, is this person going to want to drive all the way into the office? Is this something that we've experienced, that we've employed people who live near the US border, and after 3 months they complete an internship and they can't return because it's too much of a long journey for them. So that's something that we kind of question. So if you do put your address and you live far away, include that in your cover letter, explain that. And if you don't live far away, you can add it as well. Yeah, doesn't really change much.
I've been reading some of the things in the chat here, and this isn't necessarily a question, but I've seen some people comment about matching the tone of the company that you're applying for. This is actually something that is really important. A lot of companies put a lot of information in their job description and on their website about who they are, how they work, who the people are behind just the website, and it really is a good idea to kind of use that tone as an example of the tone that they're looking for. That's exactly what we do. We're a little bit witty on our website. We kind of, mock ourselves a little bit. We take our work very seriously, but we don't necessarily take ourselves all that seriously, which is why when we talk about humor, for us, that's a really, really good tactic. If a company's website doesn't really have some of these humorous jokes on it, then that's a good indication that maybe humor is not necessarily the best way to go. So that is a really good tip that I've seen some of you guys talk about, which is really to to think about who the person is or who the company is that you're trying to apply to and get a job at, and really try to appeal to some of the more emotional sides that they're conveying through their website.
Sorry, we got a question from Crystal, which is, what are your personal thoughts on candidates following up after applying for a job? I get mixed opinions from recruiters, would love to hear yours. I'll share mine, maybe one of you think differently. It's good and okay to follow up with a recruiter if after maybe 2 to 3 weeks you still haven't heard back. But if you write to the recruiter too soon, maybe we've gotten many times people are like, I'm waiting for an answer, it's been 3 days. Well, it means that you don't really understand that our time, and as we've said many times, we're going through hundreds of resumes, and sometimes it takes like up to a week to be able to clear the backlog and to finally get to yours. So sometimes when we're rushed, it doesn't seem very respectful of our time, but it is sometimes, there are times where unfortunately resumes fall through the cracks, or there's a reason why maybe a recruiter was away on vacation and they weren't able to go through that set of resumes or something. Maybe that's just a quick reminder of, hey, I'm really interested. Don't be pushy when you ask for a follow-up. Make it as like nice as you possibly can, but just, I'm really interested in the position. I just want to know if the position is still open. That's a good place to start. Yeah. Do you agree?
Another thing to add on to that is, sorry, Eileen, is that this is, again, you can turn this into a little bit of an opportunity for yourself. If you haven't already gotten a call back, like Celine said, try not to be pushy, but it's another touch point that you are making with the recruiter, and it's another opportunity for you to give us a little bit more information. Maybe you throw a little joke in there. Maybe you tell us a little bit more about yourself in a quite short and condensed way, so that, you know, it's not detracting from our time, but that it's adding to your application instead of just asking a question, which is, when are you going to look at my application? This might be another way to get the recruiter's attention. We get a lot of questions that are quite generic. When are you going to follow up on my application? Hey, can I hear what's going on with my application? Use this opportunity to tell us a little bit more and try to get our attention again in the ways that we've described. And if you are following up after you've had an interview, I know we're not talking as much about the interview process right now, but one of the ways to follow up after you have had an interview is, again, not to just ask, hey, what is happening with my application? When are we moving on to the next steps? Are we moving on to the next steps? But to really tell us something, to go back to something that we mentioned in the interview process, or something that you had talked about in the interview process. Refer back to your interview, make it personal, show us that, you know, you had you might have appreciated the experience, or really try to draw on the experience that you have had, because that's, again, another touch point for you to show us who you are, to show us a bit of personality, and appeal to our human side.
Sorry, there's more questions. Interrupt me whenever you want to add to something or just answer a specific question. But instead of a cover letter, can we share a presentation along with a resume? I would recommend in your cover letter, this is how most people do it. They send in the cover letter in a Word format with a link to, because many software systems, if they're expecting a cover letter, you can't download different formats that aren't Word or PDF. So maybe a link to the YouTube video, or maybe a link to a PowerPoint. Someone had made a drive that was shareable with anyone with a link. And in that drive were the steps on how to get to the presentation, the doc, whatever. So you can do that. I saw another one that was good. Do you guys see something that you want to answer? We have a few more minutes.
Yeah, there's a question. Is it good to connect with recruiters before applying for their company's jobs? Again, Celine kind of touched on this a little bit, but sending a message through LinkedIn and saying, hey, I just found out that you have an open position and I just applied for it, just letting you know. That's a quick message that you can send, and it does remind us when we go to your application, oh, he messaged me or she messaged me on LinkedIn. And if you want to ask more specific questions about the job, that's also encouraged. But yeah, so
it's a quick way for us to, okay, I can quickly go on that message and I can stalk you a little bit on LinkedIn in 2 seconds. It really doesn't require that much time, but it is something that can move you ahead faster. So if I get a message from someone who says, I just applied, I'm really excited, I'm going to click on their LinkedIn, and if I think, oh, this could be interesting, I will always send that person's name to Eileen to go search into the hundreds and hundreds. Just quickly type this person's name and have a look at it and let me know if you want to have to meet that person. So that can be handy. Yeah. Anything
There's
else?
a question here, which is, would you recommend using a template for cover letters, or are cover letters written in a more raw fashion favorable? So again, here, it really depends on the degree of customization. If you're talking about a template that you're just gonna use to maybe change the name of the company and just send it to all the different companies, then you could do that and you have customized it to some degree. But we often go out of our ways to write pretty creative job descriptions and to really put effort into the job description. And we try to give applicants as much information to riff off of in their cover letters. So when you use a standardized template and you just customize the name of the company that you're sending it to, we can tell. And so things that are more raw show us a little bit more of your personality. It shows us a little bit more about who you are in the moment. And it also shows, you know, when you get struck by inspiration after reading a job description, that inspiration can really fuel a good application. So you can use that to your advantage to, as like a raw form of cover letter.
Yep. There's another question here quickly. What do you think about students having a disk withdrawal notation on their academic record? We're going to be transparent with you. We don't personally ask for transcripts. We don't really care about that. Someone can be bad at school, but can also be an excellent computer software developer. So to be completely transparent with you, I don't have the correct answer for you, but it is something I would also be interested to know more. So I'm going to try and find that information from my fellow recruiter friends and get that for you. Is there something else you guys can see? Maybe one or two last questions before we move on?
There are some questions that we've gotten about the corona situation, the COVID situation, and how that might kind of impact your application. Obviously, there are a lot fewer jobs right now, which, like we've said, means that you really want to be taking the time to stand out from the crowd. Like we've said, if you don't have experience, try to really think about the experience that you do have and how it can be relevant and applicable. If you had an opportunity lined up and it fell through because of changes on the company side, that's okay. Go at it again. You'll find something. Don't let that dissuade you. And if you really need to kind of make that transparent on your resume, you can. I think a lot of companies are being considerate of the fact that there is a global pandemic happening, and will take that into consideration when they're looking at your resume.
I have a few questions here that I can answer very quickly. Hello, should I explain about the job gap in the CV or in the cover letter? Don't do it in your resume. Try to make it as like condensed as possible. You don't need to put that information there. I would put it in the cover letter so you can explain it more. And what is the best way to find smaller scale companies like Jonar? I think on LinkedIn, you can filter through companies that have less than 50 employees. It's pretty easy to do, and you can filter by the city that you want to look for. I think, as we were talking about before, quality over quantity. Find the company that really resonates with you, like something really interests you. Do your research on companies like that. And if you're looking for a software company, that's more what you're interested in. You can also filter by types of industries of companies that you're looking for. That might be handy. And do you pay attention to the references provided by applicants? This comes later on. We only call the references once we've already met the applicant and we've decided whether we like them. We don't call references in advance to meeting the individuals. Any last questions that either of you want to go over? Okay. All right. So is it better to have one page for the resume? Eileen, you can answer that one and then we'll move on.
Yeah, so it depends. Like I said previously, if you're a recent graduate, try to keep it at one page. You don't want to overwhelm the recruiter. We just want the basic facts of your work experience, your education, your skill set, and then you can go into more detail in your cover letters. So try to keep it as concise as possible so that it's easy to read through.
Awesome. If there's any more questions here that we didn't get to answer, I'm going to be writing an article with the answers to each question that we have received. So you'll receive that later on. You can also receive a recording of this video to answer Antonella. We will be sending that to you tomorrow, and it will be the recording of the session that we had, and you can share that to social media. If you can just bear with us another 30 seconds, we're going to share with you a poll. We just want to know whether this was a useful session for you or not. And so we're going to be sending that to you, and then we're going to be leaving you to enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you so much for attending. And here is the second poll. Oh, apparently the polls aren't opening on the iPhones. I'm sorry. It was really lovely meeting you guys, and thank you for being so many to come and attend. And yeah. Okay, I'm going to leave you 1 minute, and once you've answered, you may go enjoy the rest of your days. Thank you so much. Good luck to everyone on looking for positions and applying to jobs.
And congratulations to the recent graduates, if there are any.
Yes.
And just for anybody who is curious about our own recruitment, we are recruiting developers for the fall, and you'll see that coming up on our website in the next few weeks. Yeah, anytime we're recruiting, we post it on the website, so you can follow our website if you're interested in any of our positions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, 4 more seconds. Perfect. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye.
Bye.